Today at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Politically Conscious, we ask the real question: are African Americans politically homeless, ignored by Democrats, impacted by Trump's second-term policies, jobs, healthcare, education, contracts on the line? And when the Civil Rights Act is questioned, that's not just talk, it's direction. So who's actually working for Black America? No spin, no loyalty to parties, just outcomes. If you're tired of the propaganda, listen to us. And welcome to episode 67 of Politically Conscious. We are still in this thing, trying to give it to you straight, no chaser. If you're tired of the propaganda, listen to us. I am your moderator, Montoya Smith of the Politically Conscious Show. I'm going to introduce our two political experts and get into today's discussion. I think it is time to have a report card on what this administration has done and is still doing to the African American community. As Brother Shelley Winters always highlights, that Trump built a coalition of voters that included Hispanics and Black men specifically. And so I wonder if that is still the case based on what's happening now. But without further ado, I'll start with you, Emil. Give a short background so we can get into our cuts. For those who are a first-time watcher, we actually show political clips from around the media and social media and react to them and give you a straight notation version of what we see there. Emil, tell them who you are, brother.
I am Emil Bryant. I am a political consultant, author, speaker, and general rabble-rouser thinker. My job is to tell a political candidate when they want to work with me, to tell the truth, tell it early, tell it often. Bad news does not get better with time. And I will always emphasize that the American voter needs information with which they can make an intelligent and informed decision. And the politician's job is to tell the truth.
All right, Leo, tell them what you do. You heavy in this political game as well. Again, shout out to our two-day political event here in Atlanta just a couple of weeks ago. And so we back at this thing back on YouTube where we started. Go ahead, brother. Tell them who you are.
I am Leo Smith, the principal at Engage Futures Group, LLC, which is a government relations, public policy, and technology development company here in Georgia. Formerly, the Republican National Committee strategist on voter engagement, focusing on minority voter engagement. Also, formerly political director at Georgia Republican Party. Now I'm sort of a conservative, sort of in purgatory as we deal with the current MAGA movement, but conservative to the core.
All right, respect it. All right, today's question was, are African Americans politically homeless? And I'm going to take a slightly different angle with it, play the cuts like we always do. And I think that theme will make sense as we go through these cuts. So let's start here. This guy's name is Rahm Emanuel, talking about the Democrats in general.
We lost the plot. We as Democrats nationally, from Latinx to defunding the police to police organizations are all racist to bringing a set of cultural wars to our schools. We are on the losing side of those cultural wars. Full stop. You are worried about bathroom access and locker room access. Why don't you focus on classroom excellence? You have 50% of our kids not reading at grade level.
Well, they can just say we can do both.
You've proven you can't, because you've permitted a 30-year low in reading and math scores, and nobody seems to be calling the whistle on this. We've lost the plot.
Why?
Because the party got unanchored. Every one of our most successful electoral presidents anchored themselves in what I call middle-class values and values that are universal, at least in this country, ascribed to. We went from acceptance to advocacy. Big difference. And I'll just take one on that I shouldn't. So here goes. I remember fighting for Title IX. The reason we are champions in women's sports in the Olympics and soccer, hockey, etc., is Title IX. Why would you undercut the premise of Title IX with the ability of trans men playing in women's sports? To me, it's insane.
It's baffling.
You're undermining one of the great accomplishments we as a country, but also spearheaded by the Democratic Party, Title IX. And we're undercutting it.
Leo, I'm actually going to let you start. I normally let Emil start, but I want to let you respond. I actually agree with a lot of what Rahm Emanuel was saying, and I think it's specifically that, generally speaking, I think it's fair to say that the African-American community would agree with him. Generally speaking, of course, I'm generalizing, but I would offer that the community itself would. Your thoughts on what you're seeing there, brother?
Let's make this very clear. Rahm Emanuel is a Chicago Democrat, a Obama Democrat. So that's not like some Republican trying to score points or draw people away from the Democratic Party. That is about as an integrity-based analysis as you can give. And I agree with him a wholehearted. It's been sort of like my entire motivation for not being a conservative Democrat, right? Not being a center left guy has been that I don't think the Democrats have really truly ever cared about us except for electoral opportunity. And once they found markets, Latinos, the gay movement, then they like totally abandoned the interest in investing in Black American uplift, having a historical platform that dealt with accepting the reality of Reconstruction incomplete. We need an Reconstruction 3. Democrats never committed to a third Reconstruction. They never committed to helping Black people have an investment in their infrastructure, in their education, etc. I worked hard on prison reform. I worked hard on access. I worked hard on deregulating licensing for professional trades. Democrats wouldn't jump into any of that stuff. In fact, they were against it. So that is the truth coming from a Democrat.
Emil, your thoughts on Rahm Emanuel or anything Leo had to say?
First of all, I agree with Leo, but I challenge Rahm Emanuel because as mayor of Chicago, crime went up under him. They hit a 20-year high in murders under his watch as mayor. So I don't tend to listen to him as a political pundit for that reason, because when he had the opportunity to make a dent in politics, he didn't do it. And although his analysis touches some points, here's the thing that I think he really sort of emphasized with the Democratic Party. One of the reasons why so many people are disillusioned with them. What do they want for us? Not what do they tolerate or what they will do, but what do they want for us? There was a very clear line they had in the 60s and 70s about what they wanted for us. The Democratic Party was very clear. These are the things we will do for Black people. And as Leo said, over the last 40 years, that has been significantly diluted. And I'm going to go to a point in history real quick to emphasize that. During the Reagan era, they were starting to push back hard on the labor union busting that was going on. But they also began taking corporate money at the same time. So they went from pushing back on labor union busting, which was a very important platform on the Reagan side, but they were also playing both sides of the fence, trying to support labor and beginning to take corporate money. Over the next 40 years, big corporations spent roughly the same amount of money on Republicans and Democrats. Wait a second, you can't be pro-union and take money from Fortune 500 companies. Those two don't mix. And that has been one of the reasons why the Democratic Party looks so unanchored. They have chosen corporate dollars over their base, which they had established over 40 years between the New Deal and the early 80s.
Okay, well, thinking of the question, are African Americans homeless? I actually challenged Leo. I actually challenged Shelley with this conversation maybe last time. Well, I think it was the last time he was on, or maybe two times before that. And I said, as a political independent myself personally, while I can agree, and we were using basically what happened with the Jasmine Crockett and Tallarico election in Texas to kind of point out that it's clear that basically Black people are just political pawns on the chessboard for Democrats, as you already mentioned, to be used strictly for electoral votes. That's it, not necessarily offering something in action. So you already pointed it out, Leo. I'm kind of going somewhere with this. And so what I challenged Shelley at the time, I said, well, as a political independent, when I look at things and actual policies and things of that nature, that while I can easily say, I can see that the Democrats really don't care about African Americans. I feel like I have the Republican Party, or specifically this administration, actively working against African Americans. And so I said, so I asked him, would it not be wise as an African American who understands political interests, you should be able to move between the parties, especially as an independent. Would it not be wise to still align with those who do not care, but still get the most policy benefits from those who do not care? That's what I asked him. So I'll ask you that same question and then play another clip. Excuse me.
Yeah, if I understand your question, Montoya, you're saying, would it make sense to align with those who are pushing policies that can help the community that you feel like needs the most help? Or in my case, if I think that the Black American community as a whole has some need for investment, then yes. So that's why I have pretty much, and I said that I'm a Republican in purgatory. What that means is that I've decided to focus on issues. So I brought up 3 issues. I said school choice, right? I said prison reform and licensing, work licensing deregulation. Those are policy issues. If the Democrats were pushing that, I would have advocated it more on the Democrat side, but they weren't. So now what am I doing? So Engaged Futures Group, I have a contract that I'm advocating and pushing affordability, and I'm leading campaigns and advocacy groups and legislative push on affordability, as a conservative Republican. And now I'm mostly working with about, 60-40 Dems and Republicans on that particular campaign. So the point is that, yes, we need, as a Black leadership community, a Black public servant community, a Black legislative community, etc. No matter what party you might mostly vote for, when there's an opportunity to push a platform or some issues that can impact Black dignity, investment in Black infrastructure, Black education, Black futures, Black self-reliance, as a way of making all of America stronger, then we need to have more focus in that direction and less party loyalty.
Absolutely, less party loyalty. I will challenge real quickly. Again, I can easily see that the Democratic Party does not push Black issues in the way that we're saying. I can clearly see that. However, for those who are like, well, look at how they just dismiss us. And I'm like, well, what are you getting from either party? Because there's still things that you can still get, especially if you vote locally. So I just want to kind of keep that in mind, because what some of us do is we become dismissive of the entire process, or some people go as far as to say, well, they don't care about you, so I'm going to go vote over here, while there are evident policies that are against the community. Like, that's a reality. Like, here's something that President Trump said weeks ago. We never picked up on it as a show, but I'm bringing it back to the table for today's discussion. So this is something that he was saying in the New York Times some weeks ago. I didn't even look up how long ago it was, but I know we didn't cover it when it happened. I'm going to share this real quick and just get y'all thoughts.
You are in news.
According to the New York Times, President Donald Trump said in an interview that civil rights era protections led to white people being, quote, very badly treated, unquote, openly embracing the idea of reverse discrimination as a driving force behind his administration's racial policies. Asked whether the Civil Rights Act and affirmative action harmed white men, Trump said, quote, white people were very badly treated, claiming some were, quote, not invited to go into a university or college, unquote, and were denied jobs they deserved. While acknowledging the civil rights laws accomplished some very wonderful things, he insisted they were also unfair in certain cases. NAACP President Derek Johnson said there was no evidence that white men faced discrimination by the civil rights movement, noting it was designed to address generations of racial exclusion, not create new victims.
So this was said by President Trump in an interview weeks and weeks ago. Again, Emil probably knows how long knowing him, but I'm going to start with you, Emil, because what I want to do again for this conversation, are African Americans politically homeless? I think that thought process is behind a lot of the actions that we see. I'm going to play some cuts after this that highlight some of the recent executive orders. We've talked about the previous attack on DEI and the misnomering of it and calling it intentionally saying that it was merit-based when actually they were actually playing with everybody, because legally it has to be merit-based. So it was a joke to even use that terminology to tear down DEI. But also I wanted to highlight for this conversation that we have a president who actually believes what we just saw in that quote. And again, I think it plays a part in the policies that are still coming. And also for those who even highlight, well, Project 2025 said they were going to do all this. And I remember Shelley once called me when it first kind of blew. He was like, is this a real thing or is this something made up? And I was like, well, no, it's still real things in there. I said, the thing is, we know that Project 2025 got a name for the reason that it did, and it was used for political theater, but both parties create their agenda in this way through think tanks and put it all in one package. And I said, so unfortunately, the crazies have their part in Project 2025. This is what I said to him personally. But if I have a president who believes that thought, I think it's fair for people who start saying, hey, here's these things coming to fruition. Your thoughts, Emil?
So here's the thing, and I agree with you, and this is the challenge that we have. So it's multifold. One, Black people were once split 2-1 with the Republican and Democrat Party under Eisenhower, and in 1960 they voted at about 36% for Nixon. So we have a precedent for voting for whoever we feel works for us. That changed when Nixon went toward the Southern strategy in 1968, where he had about half the support that he did in 1960. So he runs again in 68. He gets half the support because he pivots to the Southern strategy. That's important because Black people never forgot that. And now you see the fruit of that because you have people like Andrea Lucas, who was appointed by Biden to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, who has said in December of 2025, white men, you tell us at the federal government, if you've been discriminated against, we'll support you, we'll look out for you. Now, the federal government under Trump is looking for reasons by those words that you showed on the screen, in the clip. The federal government is looking for reasons to defend white men from discrimination. Hello, that's kind of opposite of what we were trying to do with the law in the first place, because the majority of employers, vast majority of employers, were white and white men. So when you start to see this shift under this administration, following the politics, you have to ask the question, and this is what Black people have yet to answer. Where do we go from here? We have one group of people who is openly hostile and another group of people who gets amnesia very topically, right? Very systematically. They go, oh, every 4 years or so, we'll remember you and we'll throw some bones in there, but we'll hide them and we won't put them up front. President Clinton, President Obama used to put that stuff front and center. Even though Obama wasn't as big with it, Jimmy Carter did it. And then lots of Democratic candidates who didn't win did it as well. But boy, in the modern era, it is hard to find a Democrat who will say, this is what I did for Black people and I stand by it. Because what the Democrats of another generation knew, what helps Black people helps all people. That's what LBJ knew. That was very clear. What helps, Jimmy Carter knew it too. What helps Black people helps all people. But you don't have that kind of thinking anymore. To Leo's point, what you have is people who are willing to fight culture wars in response to other culture wars that have been fought and waged very successfully for the middle class white voter. And the problem with the middle class white voter is that they're not the only middle class voter in the country, but you appeal to them the way you do through these cultural wars. And the Democrats are losing Rahm Emanuel's point because nobody wants to see that as a front and center issue when you have struggles with food, housing, education, and opportunity. So now you can kind of see the growth from all the way from when Black people had a choice and therefore their issues were front and center to where Black people don't seem to have a choice and their issues seem to fade away.
Leo?
I want to get back to that very powerful post, a very can be very emotional post of what was being attributed to Donald Trump that you started with, right? The whole idea that Trump was saying civil rights has gone too far, and white people have lost opportunity in that. Well, actually, there are white guys who didn't get into schools because they weren't meritorious enough, qualified, or they and so that's real. And yes, the world is competitive. If I've got 15 spots and I'm going to give 15 spots to people, and I got a restorative justice thing to say that I need to restore trust in our democracy and the idea of merit by taking people who had previously been excluded from education, that has made our country weaker because we excluded all these talents and these ideas from the system. That weakened us. So to make us stronger, we need to make sure that they give access to education. That's only fair, that's restorative, that is not ahistorical, and that's moral. Okay, so that's what we did. Now, what happened is that we went too far with some stuff. We then jumped into any immigrant who had brown skin who wasn't hurt by America's history, right? Who weren't part of America's enslavement. Then we started adding all that into diversity and civil rights. Now, the restorative aspect of civil rights was related to injustices to Black Americans. So when you get a Vivek Ramaswamy, and he walks in and the Democrats are not making the right argument, the liberals are not making the right argument about why we do civil rights, then you've basically created a vacuum. Nature abhors a vacuum. If you have a canvas that has nothing on it, then you get immigrants who don't know the history of America. And they might be someone like the Attorney General, the Assistant Attorney General, Harmeet Dillon, a Sikh immigrant who comes here. She has no clue as to why America had things like affirmative action and civil rights legislation. Why? Because she comes here as a Sikh immigrant. She's raised by a conservative Sikh family. They move from New York to North Carolina. Then she ends up in San Francisco after she goes off to Dartmouth College and gets a law degree, right? But then what does she do? She does what most immigrant people of color do when they come to our country. She starts fighting for the Sikh community. She starts fighting for resources for her people. So she starts a law firm specifically for her people. And she gets a job pushing back against the San Francisco, where the politics in San Francisco was gay, 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 gay. So here she is reacting to that. And while she fights and loses some battles and wins some battles, she then decides, I am against civil rights. Well, she's mostly against civil rights on the basis of her experience in San Francisco, which has very little to do with Black people in America. So when you look at this whole issue, and I've said it before in your show, we have a responsibility to make sure that those people who are naturalized to our country also understands the history. And when you come here and you're part of the American fabric, you're also responsible for learning American history and why certain laws exist. And most of the people advising Trump can't even push back because he has a lot. His wife is an immigrant. Harmeet Dillon is an immigrant. He has a lot of people who are extremely ahistorical. So he's doing that. Trump knows the history, but he's doing that because he does what serves him well. So throwing out that cultural bomb, saying, oh yeah, civil rights is gone too far, that's going to benefit the culture war that's going on. That culture war has been made possible because liberals and Democrats did not give rational reasons and properly defend certain aspects of civil rights because we watered it down too much to be about touchy-feely stuff about the world.
I'm going to go one step further than Leo and say not only did they let it get watered down, not only did they water it down, but I think they intentionally did so. I think it was not to their benefit I would say since the Clinton administration, it wasn't to their benefit to keep those politics the way they were. They saw some opportunities. The electorate was not getting more white. Let's be very clear. The electorate was getting more brown. It was getting more Latino. Latinos during the Clinton administration were still the second largest demographic in the nation outside of Black people in terms of minorities. And then they overtook Black people since then. So the demographics that the Democrats were leaning on could have been made it so easy for them to stay focused on the issues that got them as far as they went. But that was not the case. And you have to ask why. Why were white voters so lucrative a target when you had the fastest growing demographic in Latinos and the other Second, another fast-growing demographic was Asian Americans writ large, which includes Indian, Sikh, and Pacific Islanders, as well as Chinese Americans and Japanese Americans, Korean Americans. So when you start looking at these demographics and how they were shifting, the Democrats missed an opportunity to really bring a lot of people along, i.e., these programs that have benefited Black people have benefited all people. They could have stuck with that. And if they had, they probably would be a lot further along, and they probably would have a lot better prospects in 2026.
Now, good stuff.
Amen to that. And I want to point out, just so people don't think I was talking off, just pure rhetoric, check out Politico, April 6th article about Harmeet Dillon and the push against civil rights. So in other words, Trump is echoing something that he's hearing from his cabinet, right? So he's, then that's often the case. So we've got to be real about the source of this anti-civil rights stuff, the whole Asian American manipulation on affirmative action. This stuff is mostly new immigrant driven. Let's be real about it. And then the white folks are just saying, "Oh, here's an opportunity for us to get some stuff back." That's all they're doing.
No, that's great that you say that. I'm glad you say it, particularly for this show, because of how I presented it. Because I've highlighted throughout this year long, while we've been on over a year now on this podcast, I've always highlighted what you just said, Leo, is that he's the puppet because he can be manipulated in this way. But we make the mistake of looking at him as the actual villain. And so that's great. So great point. Because I didn't clarify that today when I highlighted playing that clip specifically.
Oh no, I'm gonna always blame him. I'm just not blaming him exclusively.
I can dig it. I ain't mad at
He's the president.
Yeah,
but we also have to. There's some zeitgeist.
Keep pushing. Let me put some of these comments.
Yeah, go ahead. Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, let's jump to the comments. Then I'm gonna get some more cuts. So our first comment was from Kenny, who said the Republicans are overtly racist. Democrats have covert racist, but the RNC is actively looking to hurt us. That's the problem we ignore. I already kind of asked y'all that question, so we'll go to my next one. Was from my man DeJuan from.
Can I say this though? Hey Montoya, I'd rather the overt racist than the covert racist. Because if I see the obvious racist, I know how to move around that. But what's happened to Black people is that covert racism has made us assimilate to the racism.
All right, I got my man DeJuan says, I'm way behind on this, but there's literally no reason to ever take Rahm seriously, even if he happens to say something after it. I'm going to respond to that one real quick, and we'll go to the next one. DeJuan, what I'll say is, yeah, you are, yeah, I know you jumped on a little late, DeJuan, but what I will say to you is simply this: at the end of the day, the truth resides. Don't ever attach it to the actual. Don't attach it to the actual person. Like I always say, get the message, F the messenger. I usually say the word on mental dialogue. I was cursed, but on politically conscious, I would say F the messenger.
After this Easter, you can say the F bomb. It's okay.
Well, I was going to say, how presidential of you, I mean,
right?
You're not meeting the standard, brother.
Yeah, because it ain't normally my way. I normally just say it. Yeah, all right. But I'm just deciding. Right now, I'm trying to move away from the way our president is leading us in decorum. How about that?
I love it.
You got Kenny. Got a couple of more. He says, I'll give you one more comment from him. He has a couple. He says, if you say Black, it triggers white people. They will automatically vote against the person in the proposal. People don't understand racism. Then the policy guy that says, I second on the covert racism piece. So thank y'all for y'all thoughts. Keep them coming. Let's get to another cut here, y'all. All right. And this is speaking to some specific things that have recently happened.
On March 26, 2026, Trump signed another disastrous DEI executive order that puts $10 billion in Black business revenue on the line. And if you work for an entity that has a federal contract or contracts, this affects you too. Stay with me. Here's what this disastrous executive order requires. Every company with a federal contract, and we're talking millions of jobs, must now certify they have zero DEI activities. So here's what's actually at stake. Over 5,300 Black-owned businesses hold active federal contracts right now as I speak. And Black business ownership was growing at the fastest rate it has seen in 30 years until this. This isn't happening in a vacuum. Since Trump took office, Black men have already lost over 500,000 jobs because of Trump's anti-DEI agenda. And that's on top of a nearly 2 million job deficit that we're already dealing with, which represents about an $87 billion income loss for our community alone in 2025. Meanwhile, white women's unemployment remained unchanged in 2025, although they benefited the most from DEI. So don't let anybody tell you that DEI cuts hurt everybody equally. And besides, since DEI helped white women the most, why is Trump targeting blacks? Why isn't he targeting white women since, again, they receive the most help from DEI? Here's the answer. His anti-DEI agenda gives him a false racist reason to attack black Americans. By the way, we already fought this battle 80 years ago. President Woodrow Wilson weaponized the federal government against us way back in 1918, 1919. A few years after that, A. Philip Randolph faced down FDR. And since then, executive orders from FDR to LBJ to Nixon opened federal contracting to black Americans. And Trump is now slamming that door shut. You need the full breakdown. The complete video is on my YouTube channel right now. The link is in the bio. So go watch it and share it. And remember, God's people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. And I refuse to let that happen on my watch. So as always, stay woke.
So that comes from Defiant Lawyer. Emil, I'll start with you. If I can highlight this real quick before you start. People need to know A. Randolph story, A. Philip Randolph story. People need to know that story. It's the only, like, people don't realize this, but there are hundreds of marches on Washington every year. Like, people just don't realize that. It might be 1,000 people at it, but whatever their reason is, people march on Washington as a protest. It's something that has been used. A. Philip Randolph is the only effective march on Washington that did not take place that was actually effective. A. Philip Randolph threatened one. It actually moved the needle, and it actually desegregated the actual military, whereas the actual march on Washington with the famous "I Have a Dream" speech actually didn't even get enough votes for the Civil Rights Act. People have no clue that the one that's most famous actually did not move an actual policy. Just giving y'all a little history nugget. Go ahead, Emil. Give us your thoughts on what we had to talk about.
A. Philip Randolph is just one of the giants in our history that doesn't get enough credit for the stuff that he did because he did it quietly. I will say this real quick. The most powerful informal communication network Black America had at the time was the porters who moved city to city and were able to get messages through in ways that we today just do not understand. Having said that, the president's executive order has a 6-point test that every contractor has to meet, right? So there's 6 points that they have to include in every contract. Those 6 points very specifically call out DEI activity and very specifically call out if a subcontractor gets sued for any activity related to DEI, that they have to report that back to the federal government. And that 6-point clause also allows the federal government to check their books to see if they're in compliance with those 6 points about DEI. So you're talking about a fundamental reshaping of contracting with the federal government. And to his point, one of the ways that Black America has been able to improve its lot in America has been through working with the federal government. President Biden.
Let me say this real quick. I'm sorry to cut you off. Lola, let's get this real straight. Let's say this exactly right. This is how all businesses have been able to scale, all races, all cultures. So it's not even a thing that just like, this is how you become a big business. It's do business with the government. I just want to make sure that as much as we're focused on us, I just want that understood versus thinking this is something that just helps. Like, this is how everybody wants to play if they're going to scale. I just felt like that's necessary to be said as you're continuing to make your point. Go ahead, brother.
I was a business coach for the Minority Business Development Agency. And one of the things that's really important that people don't understand is that the federal government has centers around the country whose job is to help businesses contract with the federal government. They don't discriminate. If you are qualified to contract with the federal government, you can go there. And if you're not, they have programs to help you get qualified. And every business that wants to do business with the federal government can get this help. So to your point, government cares that deeply about that kind of contracting and prioritizes it. And most businesses that want to do multi-million-dollar contracts want to do it with the federal or state government. So when you see a test like this, what you're seeing is that the federal government is very specifically articulating a principle that it will no longer allow for Black-owned businesses specifically to have those kind of programs that often lift us up. So we have to be on a different level than we once were, because there will be fewer set-asides, right? Those set-asides are gone. Women-owned set-asides are gone. Black-owned set-asides or minority-owned set-asides are gone. And so now we have to compete with all the other businesses. And in some ways, that's a good thing. And in many ways, it's going to be hard. So this transition is going to be a rough one for a lot of people because of this 6-point test.
Here's the reality, and I'm sending it over to you, Leo. So in the past year, we've lost half of our government contracting. That's the reality of the actual numbers as someone who looks at the data. We've literally cut it in half, and there's continued actions such as this. And again, if you mistakenly believe in the propaganda that there was a merit-based aspect to it, and that now that you take a DEI away, that's the case. That's not the case. We had Mayor Dickens. I read it live on air. I don't know if you were on that show, Leo, but I read it live on air where he says we are literally meeting every other week trying to maintain these contracts that
I remember
already had. So when you come with this initiative, now they have to get competed again, because basically once you get a contract, if you meet the standard, you're going to get the contract the next year. They have to now go back into the bucket. That's no city wants to do that, but that's what has happened, and we've lost half our contracts around the country. And so, Leo, you may recall this. I told you I'm personally holding Black conservatives to the fire about agreeing with getting real DI, because I watched y'all agree with that initiative prior to him becoming the president. And now, I'm not saying that alone is what did it, but that has hurt us in education. That's not under Trump. That happened under Biden with the Supreme Court case 3 years ago. So again, I'm not attaching it strictly to Trump. I'm just talking about how we misunderstood the guardrails that DEI play and how much we've lost. We've lost the number of kids that are going to school, and we've lost half of our government contracts amongst all the unemployment that's on rise with these initiatives. Go ahead.
I find it difficult to support a concept that transitioned in meaning from restorative justice, particularly related to Black American marginalization and exclusion from freedom and prosperity, to a program that you're now defending, gentlemen, that has very little to do with restorative justice and more to do with liberal ideas on
Leo,
let me finish. You guys talk for like 5 minutes. Let me finish.
Leo,
let me finish.
You admitted it. I broke down legally how it works. So don't come on here with no concept.
So let me finish. But that's what it felt like. I can't defend DEI. I can defend functional diversity related to restoration of Black rights and access to an economic prosperity agenda. I can defend that. That's not what you're saying. So be clear. If you're going to say, "Oh, we got to go and defend DEI," well, you're trying to defend white women getting jobs overall.
That is what I'm saying. You just said that's not what I'm saying. That is what I'm saying. So respond to what I am saying. I am saying that's what it is.
Well, look, I want to respond to Montoya. With all due respect,
why you think Mayor Dickens is spending every?
I don't know anything about that. I know nothing. I can't comment on what I'm not informed about. Okay, so I don't know why. So hold on. There's a big fish in the pan. The big fish in the pan was that you showed a clip, which I assume you wanted us to comment on, Montoya, about a man who started out his clip saying about all these billions of dollars that have been withdrawn from black people, right? The fact is that when America gets a cold, black people, marginalized, don't have access to the economy, hasn't been invested in their education, they get the flu.
That ain't what
When
happened.
America gets a cold. Oh, so hold on. I want you to go and look. Hold on, Montoya. I want you to look at also the reduction in federal contracts for people who are not black. That's real. In other words, the Trump administration hit all federal contracts. He shut down the Department of Education's contracts. He shut down a lot of the Department of Defense stuff too. I mean, he hit a lot of departments. Okay, so white contracting, nobody's tracking it really, but they were also impacted. I know people who had federal contracts who are white companies who lost their contracts. So what I'm saying to you is that yes, black people were affected because there's an unbalanced amount of black people who had contracts with the federal government. So of course they would be hit. I just posted to my look, you know me, I'm about giving people information that can help them. I'm about giving people information that can help them. I'm not saying y'all are just presenting an emotional case. But what I want to do is give people something that can help them. So Bruce Lavelle is a black American Georgian.
You have to be accurate first.
What am I inaccurate about? What am I inaccurate about?
We didn't have
education.
No. We had an unbalance of jobs. We didn't have an unbalance of contracts. You just said we had an unbalanced level of contracts. That is not true. What we actually had, I look at this. You're not going to tell me the contract because we did not. We had 3.5% of contracts. That's not an unbalanced amount of contracts. Don't confuse. We had an unbalanced amount of workers. So talking about losing the jobs, that's easy to say. We had more of us had jobs with the federal government. So then, of course, if you get rid of federal jobs, we've been talking about contracting. So don't switch jobs into what we were just talking about.
I don't think that what I said is inconsistent. Yeah, I don't disagree with anything that you're saying. I think that what's that? So what is it that you object to?
They say we have unbalanced contracts. That's not what happened. We didn't have unbalanced.
So are you trying to wait a minute, Montoya? Are you wait a minute, Montoya? Give me some historical facts. Has having access to federal contract been beneficial to Black Americans?
Absolutely.
Okay. Is that one of the ways that Black Americans have had uplift and risen into the middle class society by being able to access those?
Absolutely. I've seen people.
Is that probably right?
Absolutely.
And I have known, and so what I'm saying to you is that you're agreeing with me that Black Americans' access to federal contracting is very, very important. As a matter of fact, when you're broke and poor and outside of the regular corporate America system for doing business, having those federal contracts is more meaningful to the Black American workforce and the economy, the Black American economy, than it is for white folks. So the impact of reducing federal contracting in general, the impact of that is going to be that it's going to hurt Black Americans more.
But what about the fact that we're getting less contracts? So I understand, like it'd be one thing, hear this, we're not getting less contracts because of what you just said though, Leo. We're getting less contracts because of what the defiant lawyer actually pointed out. We're getting less contracts because of what Emil pointed out.
Well, then I think that's what we did. So that's why I want people to go to Leo Smith tweets. Go to Leo Smith tweets, because what we're going through, folks, and you got to be. This is tough love. What we're going through is a shifting. We've already said it, and you guys don't disagree that our leaders, the Black civil rights leaders, the Urban League, the Congressional Black Caucus, all these groups didn't do a very good job making the case for contracts with the federal government, employment with the federal government. We didn't do a good job of continuing to build the case for that, and therefore we have a weakness, okay? And it also means that, as you well know, guys, just like in the city of Atlanta, here's something I do know about. I think I shared on your show just a week or two ago. that the city of Atlanta had somebody making $3 million a year in a contract with the city who never even showed up to work. That's in the AJC, y'all. So there's a lot of waste in federal government and city government, et cetera, with contracts that are meaningless. So what I'm more concerned about is, how do we meet those 6 points that Emil is talking about? I don't think Black people are incapable. I know for a fact that when I have a contract with someone, if I'm making them money and doing a great job, they don't get rid of me. So I'm not saying I just need to look. There's two things that I'm first about.
What you just said is exactly what's happening in Atlanta, Leo. You just said if I'm doing a good job.
Well, I don't know the Atlanta story, so tell me more about it.
So this is what's doing a good job. Let me. Okay, I'm sorry for getting so. But we got to talk to Zach about this, because you're talking around it with this this we can do it stuff. Forget that, man. I'm talking about what really happens when you don't understand legally what's going on. So the reason.
Tell me what's happening.
So the reason Mayor Dickens has to do what he's doing is because you could, if you do a good job and meet the standard, you could just get it again. You don't have to compete again. That's how government. Emil knows how government contract works.
Wait a minute, Montoya. I don't claim to be ignorant, but I do claim to be uninformed about this issue, and I have no clue what you're talking about.
Okay, let me.
So can you inform us? Can you give me the background on this Mayor Dickens thing and let me understand it? Because I don't know what you're talking about. You did not lead. You have not given any content. You usually are really good at that. I don't know the story. Maybe other listeners don't either.
Fair enough. All right, fair enough. And Emil, help me through it, brother.
Sure.
So
let's go.
So basically, this is what happens when because again, DEI got misnumbered. It's nothing to do with merit-based. Lose that term for anybody listening. I'm talking about legally. It's legally been in place since the court cases of the late 80s. There was no quotas. All that stuff has been out of the picture. You've heard me talk about that context in the past. During the quota period, I want to give, since you're asking for this context, I'm going to give it everybody the whole story. So during the periods when white companies on their own who did not want to lose government contracting started putting in quotas, our ancestors, Black people, never asked for quotas. So during that period, there were court cases that ruled out quotas, and there were times when people were getting in that were less qualified during that period. That stuff took place. It got rooted out with a court case in like 1977, I think, Back versus California. But that was in education, but it continued to happen in employment. It still happened in like firefighters and police jobs around the country. And so people kept bringing the cases. So by the end of the 80s, all of that stuff got outlawed. And that's when legally no one could enter a job or an education or an institution of higher education that was not qualified, period, point blank. That period has been continued to be used from a political standpoint to push a narrative that people that were less qualified were getting jobs. That narrative has continued, even though legally that was not the case. Now, let me bring you home to Atlanta right now with these executive orders and what's happening. So if you understand, for anybody watching, that there was no legal, it was illegal to allow somebody to get a job, a government contract, or employment by the federal government that's less than qualified. That's been illegal since the late 80s. So when we get all the way full circle to 2025 and we have these executive orders going to the points that Emil's talking about. So if you actually were favored as a woman-owned business or a Black-owned business because they were diversifying the contracts. So again, you talked about that earlier on here, Leo. So when that was been done to basically help out the entire city. So what happens under this new executive order, what's happened is once you've gotten a contract, as long as you meet the standard of contracts, you don't have to compete every year. You just go in, give your actual numbers every year as far as what it's going to cost, what it's going to cost the city, and whatever. So you just turn your numbers in. As long as you're meeting the standard, you continue to get the contract. So you're readily awarded a contract that you've already gotten under this new initiative because designations like woman-owned and Black-owned were already applied. What Trump in the executive order made them do, it says all those that you've given in the past that had those designations, they now have to look. They have to recompete for all of those contracts.
Yes.
So that's how you go from 3.5% to 1.5%. You go to that because now you get put in the field. Here it is. And typically, because you know this, Leo, the big companies that go to cities going to get contracts, they're already positioned to outcompete any local person that's in a city. They go do that. For the companies that actually go into cities and do water, like water construction. Like I'm just saying, the major companies that do it for different companies. So if you're that local company that's been meeting the need of the city for years, and now you got to go back into the market, but now you got conglomerates coming into the city, what are they going to do? They're going to undercut you. They know the game. And you never get the contract again. That's how you're losing the contract, even though you were meeting the standard for the last 5 years.
We used to have
so let me make sure I understand. Let me paraphrase so I make sure I understand. So contracting with a city like Atlanta had previously been available to a small business, local kind of company that met all the standards for contracting. But because there was a federal law that said that you don't have to recompete every year as long as you're meeting the standards, the city was able to keep those local, smaller contracts, many of them minorities in a largely Black city. They were able to do that. But what's happened now because of the executive orders, this is what I think you're saying, the executive orders have now removed that standard of just renewing the contract as long as they were meeting the minimum, and open the book to tell the cities, hey, cities, you have to make all contracts with the city a new competition every year.
It sort of
I actually don't have a problem. I have no problem with that. Now, what I don't think that's race-based. I think that if someone comes in and says, well, we're going to have a free market
You don't
approach,
think that's why they're doing it, Leo? Come on,
I don't think you can prove. I don't think you can prove. Hold on, let me finish. You asked me a question. You want me to answer it, Montoya?
You don't think that's why he's
Well,
saying
you hear what I said. So if you want an answer, I'll tell you why I'm saying it. Okay. All right. It doesn't look, again, I am not one who's surprised by racism. I don't expect white people not to be racist. So whenever, hold on, let me finish. This is obviously triggering you guys, man. Y'all won't let me finish.
I'm letting you talk.
Let me finish.
I'll get you when I'm done. When you're done.
So let me finish. And then I'm going to rest I'll just stop after I make this final statement. The city of Atlanta is controlled by a Black city council, is controlled by a Black mayor. It's only had one white mayor in I don't know how long. Okay. So I'm sorry. I'm not playing the violin and crying because the city of Atlanta can't figure out how to issue contracts that they're in control of. I'm sorry.
So right. That's a joke, Leo. That's a joke what you just said. I'm gonna speak on it from a federal perspective real quick. About 1.5% of all federal contracting dollars go to Black-owned businesses. That number is going to go down.
Wait a minute, but see, you're talking federal again. Y'all just making the case on the city, but now you're talking federal. Whatever.
I'll stay on the city real quick. Let me stay on the city, and then I'll let you go, Emil. So staying on the city. So we always give props to Governor Mayor Maynard for actually going to get those contracts with WAP at the airport. I don't know if you know the story behind Leo on how that was done. I don't know if you know the story, so let me give you the history on how it was done. So when you say I'm not going to play the violin because they can't do it, you're not really being respectful of the actual attempt of what's being done federally to make sure it's not easily done. So this is what happened with Maynard when they first offered, and Maynard says, "Hey, we're going to make sure there's." I think he did 25%, maybe even 30% is what Maynard was pushing for when they were building the airport, whatever. So when they went out and done government crack, here it is. Here's where you and I agree, Leo. Where we agree is I'm never surprised at white people's racism, ever one point. But for you to dare come on here and tell me that wasn't race-based is actually disagreeing with the whole point of how things like this happen. So when Maynard first tried to set the initiative, this is what he was up against. So he says, hey, let's go get black people to help with the airport. I'm giving the short paraphrase version. So he says, all right, let's go get the people. So all the people that were in the city at the time in his administration says, "Oh, we went out to try to meet this need." They literally came to Maynard and says, "We can't find any black contractors to meet this." Like they literally said, "We scrubbed the city," and they came back with 0 to Maynard. You know what Maynard said to him? He said, "All right, how do y'all do this? How do y'all do this contracting thing?" And the way they were set up at the time, your company had to fill everything. Like, so basically as a company, if I said I was going to get this part, if I was competing for this part of the airport, I would basically have to get all the subcontractors to do every part of that project. And so that's how the contracts were bidded at the time. Maynard says, "Oh, okay, I see how y'all doing it." He's like, "Well, I know of a couple of companies myself that do specifically that. Let's redo this as subcontracts." And that's how they were able to get to the 25%. But the reason
is that your advice to Mayor Dickens? Is that your advice to Mayor Dickens?
So let me finish what I'm saying. What I'm saying is this. What I'm saying is the whole comeback to Maynard was absolutely race-based to say, "Oh, there are no contracts." That's the game that was played. And so
is that what's happening today? Did someone say to Mayor Dickens, "Hey, you can't find black contractors"?
Somebody else wanted to let you finish. Let him finish. He's getting there. Let him finish.
Yeah. So what I'm saying to you now is you're having someone who's been meeting the standard already have a contract. Let me see here. All right. You have someone that's already been meeting the city standard, getting the contract. And so if we're going to be this honest about a small business now having to compete with a national business coming to get a contract in the city, that's going to knock out all local businesses, black or white. But for us to sit here and be naive about where we have been in the last 60 years, just now playing this game, to now say, "Oh yeah, well go ahead and compete with this national company." Like what we talked about, these parties taking corporate money. So who can bring it? That's the same problem we're having in housing, Leo. We are all here would all agree that the corporations bought up all the housing, and that's part of the reason why the housing rate is where it's at right now. So if you're going to sit here and say, "Yeah, after only 30 years or 40 years of contracts, now we're going to have you compete with national," when the legal things that we had in place with the guidelines allow for us, and we still wasn't even getting the 30% or 25%. We're in the teens. That's what Shelley comes on here. It's about we're only in the teens. We're only in the teens, and you are advocating for something that you honestly know is going to take the number down. Show me how do we get the number higher your way, Leo, when you're competing with somebody who's been in business 70 years and you've been in the business 5 years. How do we?
I'll tell you how. I'll tell you how.
In a massive way, when you don't even have access now under these executive orders to the additional money that allows you to compete. How do you do it then? We answer that question. How do we do it then?
I'll tell you how you do it. You develop an education system that is skill and development oriented. And then as those kids graduate with the ability to have the skills and be competitive to get contracts with the city because they got certain skills, then you blow it up with issuing those people contracts. That's what you do. Look, I'm reading the article right now, and I'm going to give it to you. It's Atlanta Journal and Constitution, February 12, 2026. Emma Hurd, I know her well, the journalist. This movement that you're talking about, and they talk about Maynard Jackson and his work in the 1970s, right? I want everybody to go look for that. I'll post it on Leo Smith Tweets so y'all can see it, the listeners, okay? I want you to look at this, and I want you to consider what's driving this conversation, okay? I'm not going to tell you because I want you to look at it for yourself. I also want you to notice that Mayor Dickens is not driving the conversation unless you can show me otherwise. And I welcome anybody to tweet under the tweet that I put up to show me otherwise that Mayor Dickens is driving the conversation. Keisha Lance Bottoms is driving the conversation. as a campaign strategy. That's all I got to say.
So when you say Mayor Dickens is not driving it, help me understand what you mean. Because again, I read the article on air. So are we talking about the same article, or are you talking about a different article?
This might be a different article. Perhaps I haven't seen the article that you read on air. My point is that
I read it. I literally read it on the air. I don't know if you were on that show with us.
My point is that I don't believe, and this is a fundamental, probably, I'm going to go study this. And not only am I going to study it, I'm going to meet with Mayor Dickens about this, because I'm heavily invested in a lot of things that are happening in Atlanta right now. Okay, from Invest Atlanta to other groups. And the idea that Mayor Dickens doesn't have the ability to direct contracting in the city, I don't buy it. I think that's obfuscation. I think that's scapegoating. I think that's trying to not be responsible for your leadership. And I don't think Mayor Dickens is that kind of guy. I think he can take control of the situation. Now, the problem again is if you've got a 30% reading level of people in your school system, how the hell are you going to be competitive economically when you're trying to issue contracts?
Where you're jumping has nothing to do with the contracts that were already sufficiently being. So
well,
you're jumping.
No. So I'm assuming that some of those contracts were not competitive in their capacity to perform. Yes, I'm making that assumption.
Wow. So you're making that assumption nationwide. So you're just saying we can't compete then, because that's what you're also saying.
Well, I'm saying in many cases, and I mean, look, I'm in business, Montoya. I do contracts with people. Some people can't cut it. Some people can. And yes, because of the lack of investment in our education, Black Americans tend to be less competitive.
So this is a problem that I don't think you can solve right now, and certainly not through education. Let's assume there's a senior in high school who's getting a vocational education. He's going to take 2 years to get his apprenticeship, become a journeyman. It's going to take him another 2 years before he actually is a viable business owner who can contract with the state or local government. That's 4 years from now. That's 4 years of opportunities we do not have. And in that 4 years, who's getting entrenched in that business? It's not going to be the small business owner. So your point, although valid, is a little bit past, it's overcome by events. You cannot compete as a small business owner with a national presence if you do not already have a leg up in that competition. Here's one of the legs up in that competition. Federal contractors used to partner with small businesses, SBA 8A kind of businesses, women-owned, minority-owned, veteran-owned businesses, so they could compete for larger federal contracts because those set-asides needed those kinds of qualifications. You take those qualifications out, those larger businesses no longer have to partner with the smaller businesses, the Black-owned, the women-owned, the veteran-owned businesses. So if they're not able to get in the door through partnerships under those set-asides, and they're not able to compete because the bigger business, through its economy of scale, can outbid the smaller business
every time.
The business. That's the problem we have right now. I work with businesses that have contracted with the federal government. If it weren't for set aside, it's not a lack of education. It's not a lack of qualification. It's not a lack of ability. It's a lack of scale. And the problem is the only way to get that scale is through partnerships with larger businesses. And in the absence of those mandated set-asides, you will not see those small businesses getting those opportunities, which is really
that happens way more than you talk about.
Part of
we ain't got, because of our 30% education, we ain't qualified. I'm gonna give you a real example. And I'm gonna send you this show. I'm gonna actually go back and find it out of my archive, because what I'm about to tell you is a real life thing I did on my old show, on my audio show. I'm actually gonna put it on video just for you, Leo. I have a brother down here, one of my biggest supporter of what I do with mental dialogue. This brother is the best in the country in what he does, which is refurbishing military equipment. He basically did it for 30 years in the military and came out and turned it into a business. I know what I'm telling you, I know firsthand. I literally watched him take business from the military depot, who was charging $80,000 to refurbish military equipment for the desert, because it takes that stuff gets all the sand in it. He could do it for $40,000. He could do it for $40,000. So of course he was getting all the business. He's the best in the business. And there was a guy, a high-level chief that goes, why are we sending all of this business to this particular company? And the particular company is a black company, black-owned company. And he literally gets froze out. And he actually goes to the Congress people here in Georgia who says, oh, we're going to take up your case. We're going to take up your case because you shouldn't be froze out. And so when he actually wanted to bring a lawsuit, they was like, no, you don't need to do that. And they opened it back up. But what happened during the lawsuit, he realized the lawyers were milking him for the money. And so he literally was about to get out of a business that he was the best in practice in. And I literally said, man, what else I literally said to him, what else are you going to do? Because this is what you know. And he figured out and got it from the mud and literally scrubbed and started getting private business to stay in business until those government contracts came back together. But to Emil's point, he partnered one time, like you just talked about, Emil, he partnered with another company to get a bigger contract. When he partnered with this white company and they was going through all the contract stuff, the people at the white company who's been in business longer, been getting business for longer than him, making more money, he's doing very well for himself now. They go, why are you doing all of these things to get, like, all these dotting these I's and crossing these T's to get this thing? They were being given the contract, and he was like, I can't get the contract without dotting these I's and crossing the T's. He was shocked at how easily they were getting a contract, and he's better than them. It's why they partnered with him. They didn't even have to do half the shit he had to do to get the contracts. They didn't even know how to do it. He was shocked. And I'll send you that story where he tells that story.
But Montoya, there's nothing shocking about your story.
Okay, I know
you just said basically what you just said is white people have the ability to do less work and get more. Yes, that's true.
So then don't come on here and tell me that the 15% or the 18% were not qualified. It's not something that can be done.
First of all, Montoya, according to the article I read, I just read the article. I went back to it because I'm listening to your numbers. It's been a 4% drop according to the Keisha Lance Bottom herself. 4% drop.
So I didn't see nothing about Keisha. I didn't read. She wasn't even in the article I read, so I didn't even see her. This was.
So I'm just gonna look. I'm on a hold right now. I'm gonna hold judgment. Okay, I may be wrong, but I still believe that the city of Atlanta can give contracts to whoever the hell they want as long as they're qualified.
That's BS to simplify it like that. That's complete BS, Leo. We just talked about
Kwame
qualifications. So that's
Kwame
BS.
Kilpatrick out of Detroit did that and went to prison for it. It's not the way.
The city of Atlanta just had a weekend party called 404 Day. City of Atlanta City of Atlanta just had a weekend party called 404 Day. People smoking joints out in public, partying, shaking their booties, doing all kinds of stuff, gunshots, fights. If you can decide that I can do some crap like that, having people go on to private properties and laying on the lawns and partying on people's private property, shutting down the streets. You're trying to tell me you don't have independence and I don't buy it. But I'll look into it.
I don't know how that's related to what we're talking about right now.
I'm just saying that you guys are acting like black leadership. Hold on. You're acting like black leadership is not empowered to lead a black city. I just don't buy it.
That is not what I'm acting like. I'm talking about the actual policies that are the reason why the thing is cut in half. You're saying the policy.
The city of Atlanta is not the federal government. The city of Atlanta is a locally controlled municipal entity.
It's federal dollars, though, sir.
So what? So if you're on the federal tit, then maybe you're on it too much. Get off the tit, create your own economy.
That's a joke, but I know you got to go.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a big.
Later, guys. Peace out.
That's a joke. That's a joke. Big joke. Yeah.
Okay.
I did a whole 2-hour show last hour and a half show on Saturday talking about this. Create your own economy. You're not realistic about the amount of money we actually have. If all
I'm going to study it, and maybe we can do another show. I hope we can, because I'm glad for the engagement. I need to be challenged. I will challenge myself to be more informed, and I will put sort of a pause mark. Now, I'm not going to put a comma. I'm going to put a comma, not a period, on my own knowledge. And I'm going to humble myself, learn more about this. I'm even going to talk to the city about it because I've been involved in presenting minority business contracting legislation to the state. I've had that discussion with Democrats who wanted to carry. Stacey Abrams tried to carry something like that. Okay. So I've had that conversation, and the city was always seen as they can do whatever they want. There may have been a change now with this federal executive order. I'm going to make myself informed about it, and then perhaps we can continue the discussion. Thank you, sir.
I would love to hear more about it. I know you got to go. All right, Emil, I'm going to keep you on for 1 second because obviously I didn't get the no cuts because I got passionately caught up in some of the BS that was just happening, man. Like, man, here's one more cut real quick, and I'll let you respond to this. This is something else that's happening in education.
The Congressional Black Caucus Scholarship discriminates according to this new lawsuit. Imagine trying to criminalize students that look like me's access to education while at the same time trying to chastise us for being uneducated. Make it make sense. And an anti-affirmative action group is suing the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, alleging college scholarships for black students from underfunded schools in majority black districts illegally discriminate based on race. So not that they come from underfunded schools, not that they come from environments and communities that has not reflected they care about their education value. You care about them getting scholarships because they come from part of the broader efforts to upend the programs intended to remedy discrimination, the lawsuit calls out the Congressional Black Caucus, which partners with the foundation. And this the part right here, when I talk about racial illiteracy, this illustrates it. Awarding educational opportunities to some young constituents, but not others based on their color of skin is neither conscientious nor legal. The American Alliance of Equal Rights said the lawsuit filed in federal courtrooms in Washington, D.C. This is the part right here that gets me. They're not doing it just based off of skin color. They're doing it because they come from underfunded school districts that these congressional members represent. And what if I told you all this was a part of the broader agenda to make sure civil rights protections and access to education for black people be put to the margins? They're trying to take us back to plantation days where it was illegal for you to read. You see what they're doing right here? Think about all the scholarship funds that go to exclusively and majority white students and how they would bust a blood vessel if somebody said, hey, y'all being racist because y'all only give it to white people. That's the reason why they had to create the Congressional Black Caucus Scholarship. Was because of that, the structural inequalities. If you fix those structural inequalities, you don't have to worry about them getting these unfair advantages that you claim they're getting. What also points out this, what about the students that already come from funded schools? Are they sitting with an unfair advantage? Education is elevation.
Emil, like that's happening as we speak.
The American Alliance for Equal Rights.
And I think I think, I know Leo, in a sense, has to go, but I think we really think we're not, the structural stuff is stopped. And it's like, I'm not trying to make it there. It's actually proven in the data. Go ahead, Emil.
So this challenge was led by the American Alliance for Equal Rights. And one of the challenges that these folks have is that they're trying to use the current law that was meant to right historical wrongs to undo the historical corrections, those corrections to those historical wrongs, and say that any discrimination is bad discrimination, right? And so the way they are doing that is this is the same group or the same thinking that led to the black women who were trying to fund themselves under venture capital, losing their funding because it was discrimination against white folks. And what it does is it ignores the 98.5% of the problem and focuses on the 1.5% or the 0.5% or the 0.15% of the issue, which is that these few black students are getting a little bit of help from a organization founded by and funded by black people. So when you see that, what you're really seeing is a designed attack. The Heritage Foundation is one of the main progenitors of this targeted attack against affirmative action, against black people's rights to be equal under the law by addressing historical discrimination as part of policy. They want to take those out and say you have to compete on a even playing field, even though there's a 400-year head start for a good portion of the people who are now competing. I'm going to tell you that this lawsuit will be successful. It will be.
Yeah, it's already proven with the other fund, with the
That's
contract
right.
fund.
So
With the fund.
what that means is that
Let me highlight this real quick.
Sure.
This is a comment. I'm gonna let you finish. Kenny says Leo is so wrong. Now you've moved the goalpost. Create your own economy. He says after we sent the tax dollars to DC in the first place, I have to support this economy and simultaneously create another one from scratch. That's always my argument to people that say create their own, as if I don't have my tax dollars taken out. Like that's crazy. Go ahead, brother. I'm sorry.
No, this is, but see, this is all works together, because one of the challenges that we're going to have to deal with in these lawsuits is that they're going to twist the Civil Rights Act. They're going to twist the civil rights laws in order to oppress the historically discriminated against people whose remedies have been through the law. So now that means that Black people are going to have to, at some point, recognize the hostility is still there, and we're going to have to use our existing resources differently. And we're going to have to figure that out in a whole new way. And unfortunately for us, it does mean we're going to have to fight uphill in ways that we haven't in 2 generations.
Because what's happening is we're not willing to be honest about the politics that's being played. Like you're just hanging on to stuff. You're having to reach for straws to not be honest about what you just talked about. The example that I'm gonna keep wanting to think of that fund's name. What's the name of that fund? I wanted to think of it. But yeah, you're right. It's going to be successful because we already watched it happen to the Fearless Fund. That was the name of it.
The Fearless Fund. That's it.
Yep. That's absolutely. And so we're not willing to, when we talk about political parties and all this kind of stuff, we're being dishonest about what's actually happening, because you've heard me talk about this. The thing that we misunderstand that our ancestors actually got us, the number one thing, it wasn't even in the 64 and 65, the 64 Civil Rights and the 65 Voting Rights Act. Everybody kind of highlights those. Ultimately, it was the 68 Equal Protection Act was the ultimate goal, but that doesn't get highlighted, and they don't teach us that for a reason. And the reason they don't teach us is because it's why they're able to manipulate it, because now what's going to happen is you're not going to have that equal protection of the law. That's the only way. Even if we get our own, we could build it and be left the hell alone, which is what our ancestors wanted that were in the Black Wall Streets. But they couldn't do that because they could get their stuff destroyed, burned down, and have no recompense in the courts. If there's no consequence, which is what basically happened by getting rid of DEI, there's no consequence. So therefore, we're going to lose the contracts. Structurally, that's how they're done. If Leo can come on here and say, well, I'm not surprised that a white man could do less and get the contract over the Black guy. And so you take away the structure is the answer? How?
I don't know.
Like, how illogical is that? How illogical is it that, because I'm not surprised. He thinks I'm naive to what gets done. We've talked openly on this show how some of those big contractors would just put a figurehead in place just to get the contract. Like I'm not naive to a white business owner doing that and putting a woman in front just to get the woman on contract when
that happens all the time.
When the guardrails in place. But here's the logic of those who saying, well, we don't need it. Their logic is they'll go, see, look at they do that. And I'm sitting here going, if they're doing that with the guardrail in place, why do you think you would take it away? What they gonna do when there's no guardrail?
When there's no guardrail, exactly.
I don't like they're going. I mean, I've literally Shelley said that on the show before. He said that example. He's literally here it is. This like Shelley's brilliant, Leo's brilliant, but if there's not a blind spot on the logic to, well, we don't need it anyway. Like, we watched them game the system with it in place. What do you think is going to happen without it? And we're watching it happen right now. We're watching, if they're successful with that case, with that lawsuit that Conscious Lee just brought to the table, then let's own that there are going to be less educational opportunities for underfunded schools.
That's right. That's
like
right.
let's own that. And here it is. The Leo, much as I respect him, of the world think, oh well, that's what we need. So that because they think there's somehow there's this own option. Here's how I say this, and I know I'm passionate today, but I'll say this. We went to school with affirmative action that was in place, me and you, right?
Yep.
But I've always said, as someone who's an advocate of affirmative action, for those who used to, especially when Black people would say, "Hey, we don't need that." I'm talking about for the ones that would say that, for those who felt they were the Leos of the world. And I go, you think there's ever been a Black student that took the SAT or the ACT and says, I don't have to get a high score because I know affirmative action is going to help me.
Unless they were an athlete, the answer is absolutely no, right? Only the athletes had that luxury of saying, I'm just going to get what I need to get my scholarship and then I'm out. And that was it. For everybody else, the other 98% of us students, we had to get our heads down, buying the SAT, thick ass SAT book,
I took courses
we had to do to get there from here. Yes.
So, but here's the point. You take away the guardrail and you think somehow I could have tried harder than I tried already with the guardrail. Like we literally have this concept, without it, we will be more serious. As if, here it is. We played the cut with the Harvard student that went to Harvard and couldn't believe her white counterparts and how dumb they were. We went to schools and watched our legacy students at the academy, like, why are they at this school? We used to ask that.
There were so many of my classmates that I ran past with my public school education because basically I didn't have the luxury of somebody making a way for me. I had to fight and claw my way into the academy just like you did. And that's the thing that I think, if there's any hope that I have, we're going to generate a very small but very hungry subsection of Black people who are going to be incredible. I can't say that'll be the majority, but there will be a group of us who are going to be incredible. There's just not going to be a lot of them.
What I'm saying to you is that's what we already do. Like it's false hope to think that with this.
I don't think it's false. I just don't think it's going to be a larger number than it is. It's just going to be.
What I'm saying is we already
number.
do that. It ain't finna increase under this new thing. Like we don't really understand how great we are. It ain't finna be bad. Like people literally, because what people do is they focus on the negative aspects of community and never really honor our entire gamut.
Right.
They don't never have the context of, here it is. We're like every group. Every group has a bad end and every group has a high end. We ain't no different. But to act like there is not structural things in place and that these political policies are not a direct attack, you're just lying. And so for political engagement will require to stay politically engaged and actually get these things back in place. If we're naive and think that we don't need them, here it is. Those who are working hard to get rid of them, why would they be getting rid of them, Emil? Because they're effective.
They're working. And
why would they even fight to get rid of them? We actually sometimes, some of us foolishly say, oh, it helped more white women. Not that that's not true. But they say that as though it didn't help us.
Right. And this is the fallacy that I want to challenge. Like, there was no movement under affirmative action or DEI policy. Are you kidding? There was magnificent movement for many, many Black people in America under those. It wasn't as effective as it could have been. It wasn't as effective as it should have been. But to say it had no effect, because I would never want to be looking for a job in 1966 versus 2026. No way, no how, no shape.
Period.
And you can't convince me that those federal programs didn't make my life a ton easier than they would have been without them. Does that mean they didn't stand for improvement, that they didn't need to be corrected, that they didn't need to be more targeted? I will agree 100% that they should have and could have been better, but I will never disavow the fact that they had major effect on Black people in America, even today, which is why they attacked them so hard. Why not only did they attack the law, they attacked the law enforcement. Not only did they attack the law and the law enforcement, they attacked the writing of the law. They were trying to undo all of those policies. During George W. Bush's administration, the Voting Rights Act was unanimously supported 98-0 for renewal for the next 25 years or 15 years, or whatever the number was. The next time it came 25, up, 25. So how do you go from a 98-0 vote in the Senate to almost not passing 25 years later, unless there is a targeted reason?
Concerted effort because it's effective. So it's like we are naive to the actual attack. Like you think if it's so ineffective, why would they even mess with it? Like that's like the logic blows my mind. And this is not about which party you with. It's about the actual policies and why they're being attacked.
The policies worked too well for some people, and they had to dismantle everything around them
because they don't want to compete. They don't want to compete. They don't want to compete.
They want to be lazy. Let's be very real. They want to be lazy.
It is what it is. All right, man. Thank you for the extra time today. This is our longest show ever because I just got passionately just locked in on this thing. I will close out with this dope. Since I didn't, this is a dope from Constant Carter. I think this is her name, Constance Carter. I am going to close out with this, just reminding us why you actually have to stay politically engaged. Like I don't want to be on the show just complaining about it. I'm on the show to say, hey, stay involved politically because you have to fight back on these concerted attacks. To just let the concerted attack happen and think we're going to be okay is BS. That's where the passion comes from. But I'm not here just complaining. And so we didn't talk it last week. We didn't get to do a show. So we didn't get to talk about the Nick Cannon stuff and the Chili stuff. So this kind of wraps it up without talking about it. But it just reminds you to stay politically engaged. And that's what we're here for. So great clip by Constant Carter. A good way to end this show.
They say Republicans freed the slaves. They say Democrats are the real racists. But let's break this all the way down with facts and not sound bites. Yes, the Republican Party was the party of Lincoln, the party that abolished slavery. And yes, for decades after emancipation, most Black Americans were Republicans because the Democrats were openly aligned with the Confederacy and white supremacy. But everything changed during the 20th century. The switch began with FDR's New Deal. Black folks didn't forget who freed the slaves, but we were desperate for help during the Great Depression. Then came Truman, who desegregated the military. And then finally, Lyndon B. Johnson passed the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, knowing it would cost the Democrats the South for generations. And that's when Southern white voters fled the Democratic Party and became the base of what we now know as the modern Republican Party. And Johnson said it best. If you can convince the lowest white man he's better than the best colored man, he won't notice you're picking his pockets. Hell, give him somebody to look down on and he will empty his pockets for you. That's the real game. The Republican Party morphed into a machine that weaponized fear, race, and religion to convince poor and uneducated working class people, especially white Americans, to vote against their own best interests. And while we as Black people are some of the most faithful, family-oriented, and conservative-leaning folks in this country, we also believe in benevolence, fairness, and equity. And we know religion without justice is just control. That's why more African Americans are becoming free thinkers, realizing that neither party truly serves our interests and that we need to focus on policy over party. But here's the bottom line. We still must be politically engaged because the politics affects our health care, our housing, education, taxes, and voting rights. Even if the system was not built for us, we still have to show up, disrupt, and demand what's ours. Because if we don't, they will keep deciding for us. That's why we got to stay woke. We got to stay wealthy, outstanding, knowledgeable, and empowered. Now drop a black fist in the comments and share this to everyone who needs to hear this Black History gem.
If you're tired of the propaganda, listen to us. So sorry about my passion today, y'all. I was cutting Leo off like a champ, man. And he was changing what I was saying. I can't let you do that. You got to at least speak to what I'm saying.
These are complex times and complex issues. Hopefully our voice is one that allows people to see that past the headline, there's a reality with fact, and that those facts can help you make good decisions. And those decisions should be about uplifting our community and yourself. I never want people to assume that uplifting the community doesn't mean making sure your family and your life isn't improved too. It should start at home, but it should radiate outward.
Absolutely. Great way to end the show. Thank you, brother. See you next week.